My sister stole my identity. I saved her life. The woman bleeding out on my operating table had my name. Literally. She'd stolen it 5 years ago. My twin sister, Lila, opened credit cards in my name, took out loans, destroyed my financial record. When I confronted her, she told our parents I was mentally unstable. They believed her. I left Boston with ruined credit and no family, rebuilt everything in Seattle. Then one night, ER trauma alert. Female, 29, severe internal bleeding. Name on file, Dr. Emma Clark. My name. She'd never changed it. When I walked into the OR and pulled down the mask, her eyes widened. You, she whispered. Yes, I said calmly. Me. She needed a splenectomy. Immediate. I could have transferred the case. I didn't because I am a surgeon, not her sister. When she woke up post-op, she cried, I ruined you. You tried, I replied, but you didn't. 3 weeks later, she signed a full confession, cleared my financial history, and for the first time in our lives, she told the truth. Not because she loved me, because she finally saw I didn't need her anymore. She thought the confession would fix everything. It didn't. The papers cleared my financial history. The banks reversed the fraud marks. My medical license file was amended. On paper, Dr. Emma Clark was whole again. But healing isn't paperwork. Lila stayed in Seattle for her recovery. I made sure another surgeon handled her follow-ups, professional distance, clinical boundaries. That was the rule. Yet the hospital corridors are long, and fate has a strange sense of symmetry. One evening, weeks after her discharge, I found her sitting alone in the hospital chapel. No drama, no performance, just silence. I keep thinking about that night, she said without looking at me. You could have let someone else operate. I could have, I replied. Why didn't you? Because in that operating room, there was no past, no betrayal, no ruined credit, no parents choosing sides. There was only a patient bleeding out. I took an oath, I said. It doesn't change based on who's on the table. She nodded slowly, absorbing a truth she had never lived by. For years, Lila survived by manipulation, by becoming whoever she needed to be. My name had been convenient, clean, credible, stable, everything she wasn't. But almost dying stripped that away. A month later, she asked to meet outside the hospital. Neutral ground, a quiet cafe overlooking the water. I'm leaving Boston for good, she said, and I'm not using your name anymore. I filed the legal change yesterday. I studied her carefully. No tremor, no hidden agenda in her eyes. Just fatigue and something unfamiliar. Accountability. I don't expect forgiveness, she continued. I just didn't want the last thing between us to be a lie. There it was. Not love, not reconciliation, truth. And sometimes truth is the most radical form of repair. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. Real life rarely mirrors dramatic endings. But when she stood to leave, she paused. You saved my life, she said. No, I answered quietly. I saved a patient. For the first time, she didn't argue. As she walked away, I realized something unexpected. I hadn't saved her to prove I was better. I hadn't operated to reclaim power. I hadn't stayed to win. I did it because my identity was never something she could steal. Not my name, not my career, not my integrity. Those were earned. And in the end, that was the difference between us. She borrowed identities to survive. I built mine. And that is why, when the world put her life in my hands never shook. And yet I would be lying if I said that was the end of it. Closure is rarely a single moment. It is a process, quiet, layered, and often uncomfortable. A week after our last conversation, I received a call from hospital administration. Not urgent, not dramatic, just procedural. There's someone here asking for you, the coordinator said. Says it's regarding a formal statement. I knew before she said the name. Lila. She was sitting in the consultation room this time, not as a patient, not as my sister, but as a witness. The State Financial Crimes Unit had reopened her case after her written confession triggered a broader fraud review. What she signed for me had implications beyond us. I'm not retracting anything, she said before I could speak. I'm expanding it. She handed over a folder. Inside were names, dates, accounts, evidence of a pattern that predated me. You weren't the first, I said quietly. No, she replied, but you are the worst thing I ever did. There was no self-pity in her tone, just clarity. For years, I had carried the narrative that I was uniquely betrayed, that our story was singular, but the truth was colder than that. I had not been targeted out of hatred. I had been convenient, and somehow that hurt less. The investigation took months. During that time, she began therapy, voluntarily, not court-ordered, not negotiated. I only knew because she told me once, briefly in passing. "I'm trying to understand why I needed to become other people," she said. "And?" I asked. I was afraid no one would choose me as I am. It was the closest she had ever come to vulnerability. Meanwhile, my life continued forward. Promotions, research publications. A surgical innovation grant I had been pursuing for 2 years was finally approved. The board cited resilience under professional adversity in their commendation. They had no idea how literal that was. One evening, nearly a year after her surgery, I was scheduled for a keynote lecture at a regional medical ethics conference. Topic: identity, accountability, and professional integrity in high-stakes medicine. The irony wasn't lost on me. As I stood backstage reviewing my notes, I felt my phone vibrate. A message from Lila. "I won't contact you after today. My sentencing hearing is tomorrow. I just wanted you to know. I'm not appealing anything. I'm not negotiating down. I'm done running." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed back, "Take responsibility, not punishment. There's a difference." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. I'm learning that. I walked onto the stage minutes later to a room full of physicians, residents, and legal scholars. I spoke about the oath, not as a ceremonial promise, but as a boundary, a line that protects patients from our emotions, our biases, our histories. Integrity, I said into the microphone, is not tested when it is convenient. It is revealed when it costs you something. I did not mention her name. I did not mention mine. But every word was forged in that operating room. After the hearing, she was sentenced to a reduced term due to full cooperation and restitution agreements. Not prison for years. Supervised custody, mandated therapy, financial repayment plans. Consequences, structured, real. She wrote to me once during that period, a physical letter, handwritten, not to ask for help, not to ask for forgiveness, just to say she had started using her original birth name again. "It feels unfamiliar," she wrote, "but it's mine." I placed the letter in a drawer, not as a keepsake, but as documentation of something measurable, growth. 2 years passed. My credit was flawless. My research department expanded. I trained residents who would one day surpass me. Occasionally, when filling out official documents, I would pause at my name, Dr. Emma Clark. There was a time when seeing it on a screen triggered anger. Now it felt earned. One afternoon, I received an unexpected email from a rehabilitation center in Oregon. Lila had completed her program. As part of her restorative process, she had chosen to speak to groups about financial identity theft and psychological manipulation patterns. She asked if you would be comfortable with us acknowledging that you were the victim in her case. The director wrote, "No details, only that you chose not to retaliate." I considered the request carefully. My silence had once been survival, but this was different. I responded with a single sentence. "You may state that I upheld my professional duty, nothing more." Because that was the truth. Not mercy, not martyrdom, not sainthood. Duty. Months later, I happened to see a short clip of her speaking at a seminar online. She stood at a podium, steady but not theatrical. "I stole my sister's identity," she said plainly. "She had every right to destroy me legally. Instead, she operated on me when I was dying. That was the first time I understood what integrity actually looks like." I closed the video before it finished. I didn't need to hear the rest. What she did with her life after that was hers to carry. What I built was mine. People often assume redemption is dramatic, that it ends in reunions or reconciliation. Sometimes it does. But sometimes redemption is quieter. It's choosing not to let someone else's failure define your trajectory. It's rebuilding without announcing it. It's doing your job when your hands have every reason to shake. We are still sisters, but we are no longer entangled. She lives under her own name now, and I live fully under mine. The night she lay bleeding on my table, she thought she had stolen everything from me. What she didn't understand then, what she understands now, is that identity isn't a document, it's a decision. And I made mine long before she ever signed my name. Years later, on an ordinary Tuesday, I received a sealed envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, Lila standing outside a small community clinic, her birth name printed modestly on a staff badge. On the back, she had written, "For the first time, I introduced myself without fear. I didn't smile, but I felt something steadier than forgiveness, peace. That evening, I scrubbed in for another surgery, another life balance between precision and chance. The monitors hummed. My team waited for instruction, and without hesitation, I stepped forward.